Hi, welcome back to Educator.com's AP Music Theory course. Today's lesson is on phrases and periods. So the objectives for this lesson are we're going to first learn to write and recognize a musical phrase, and then we're going to look at how we can put phrases together to form periods. So let's look at a phrase first. So we can think about a phrase similarly to what we've been doing in our four-part harmony lessons. So we can think about a phrase as a musical idea that then ends in a cadence. So let's look at phrases harmonically first. So perhaps I can choose a key like C major, and let's start with the first chord, which will be a 1. And then let's make sure that it ends in some kind of cadence. So let's choose a cadence. Maybe thinking back to the cadence lesson, we can have it end on a half cadence. So half cadence, which means it's going to end on a 5 chord. And maybe it approaches that from another tonic chord. So now we have these kind of bookmark sections of this musical phrase, and now we can fill in the middle. So maybe from 1 we want to move to some kind of subdominant harmony, so go to 4. And then I'll move back to 1, and then in between, let's put one more chord in between this one and this one. So what about a 5, 6? So we can see that we can build phrases by using these structural elements. So first, we are going from a bass line and chord progression and cadence, and now we can start to fill in the other voices. So let's make this into a full 4-voiced progression. So now I'll add a starting chord here, and by now these voice leading between these chords should be much more familiar to you. Everything such as keeping the common tones, G, C, E. And then, of course, for the 5, 6, again, I don't want to double the leading tone, the B, which is in the bass. So in the upper voices, I've just got G, D, and G to complete the G major triad. And then back to C major, and now to this 5 chord that we're ending on. Okay, so now let's say we've got the kind of, this is like the structure or the architecture of this phrase, and now I really just want to focus on the bass and the melody. So let's extract those and write them here. So C and E, and then B and G, C and E, and then G and D. So now I've got this great outline, and I know this phrase is a phrase because I made sure that the harmony all makes sense, the progression makes sense, and it ends on a cadence. And so this is a great starting point now to be able to turn this into a melody. So what I could do is I could think about choosing a meter now, maybe 4/4. And I could now extend each one of these harmonies into its own kind of musical idea. And maybe I want to start with the melody and making sure that it leads smoothly from each one of these structural tones to the next, but also I can add little figurations and, like, for instance, a passing tone maybe between this G and this E, or maybe, like, for instance, let's just do an example for the first measure. So maybe I can turn these into quarter notes. So E, D, C, E. So I'm kind of staying in this C major triad, and then it moves to F, and it could go F, G, A, F, and then we're back to C and E. So basically, the important thing to take away from this musical phrase idea is that a phrase is just a short and independent musical idea that ends with a cadence. We didn't flesh this out all the way, but it could be any variations of things that you can decide for yourself. The important thing is that it ends with a cadence and it's an independent idea, and that you first start by thinking about the harmonic underpinnings so that the progression always makes sense and the cadence is set up nicely. Okay, now let's look at a period, which is a larger musical idea that consists of a couple phrases. So let's think about the cadence structure of a period. So a period has two cadences in it, as opposed to the phrase that just ends with one. But what defines the period is that so let's say we're in C and we start on 1, and there's going to be some kind of cadence here, and then there's going to be another cadence at the end. And what we need to make sure is that this final cadence is going to be just that, more final sounding than the one in the middle. So maybe the one in the middle here can be a half cadence, and then the one at the end can be a perfect authentic cadence. And that way we kind of set up this tension on the dominant here, and then we end finally on the one here. And so this will be the dividing point of the period. And so if this is a half cadence, we know that this will be a 5 chord. And if this is a perfect authentic cadence, we know that this will be a 1 chord. So now all we have to do is write two phrases, and let's fill in what else we know about this period. So of course, if this is a 5 that ends this half cadence here, then we're probably going to start with a 1 here. And let's fill in all the bass line that we can. And now all that's left is to construct two phrases for these cadences that lead to these cadences. So maybe I just want to do this bass line melodically. So 1, 6. And I'll make this a 2, 6 just for variety instead of making it a 4. And then I'll go to a 2 in root position, which will then lead me to this 5. So again, I'm following this principle of using tonic and subdominant harmony leading to the dominant. And then here, maybe we'll want to go down by a third instead of up a third. So to 6, and then to 4, and then maybe down to 1, 6, and then to 2, 6, and then to 5 and 1. So again, all I've done is filled in a progression that makes sense leading up to this cadence. And I probably should have put this 5 chord in earlier, since we knew that this was going to be a perfect authentic cadence. So how can we diagram this period here? So we can, if we have some space down here, we can say that it's in C, and that the first phrase starts on 1 and ends on this 5 half cadence, and then the second phrase, we'll call this first phrase A, and the second phrase B, since it's wholly different from the first phrase. Otherwise it could be maybe A prime, and then ends with a 5, 1 perfect authentic cadence. And so this is a period. And of course, this is a phrase, and this as a phrase. And now just for good practice, let's write out all the harmonies here. So I will do that up here. So start with this same disposition of C major, and then we're going to this 1/6. So I won't double the E, I'll double the G in the soprano. And then we're going to a 2/6. So let's see here. This F will go down, this G, excuse me, will go down to F. And then the C will go up to D, and the G will go up to A. And then we can keep all that chord because then we're moving to a 2 in root position, a D minor, and then moving from that to 5. So we want to keep common tones, so the D, and then move these voices to the closest possible, so B and G. Okay, and maybe I can draw a little fermata over this, just to emphasize the fact that we're stopping on this cadence. Okay, and then from this 5 to this 1, we don't need to be so concerned about the voice leading. Since it's the start of a new phrase, we can kind of start over. So maybe for this one, I will start down here with E, G, C, going to E, A, C, and then again moving by thirds, which means we have 2 common tones, A and C. And then from this F major chord to this 1 chord, so I will move up here to the F going up to G to avoid parallel fifths or octaves, and then C, and I'll take this C up to this G. And then now we're at the same motion that we were here, so I'll follow the same voice leading. So A, D, F, and then straight to 5, so A down to G, and D stays on, or D goes down to B, and F goes down to D. And now this is a perfect authentic cadence, which means we need to make sure that we have the tonic in the soprano. So there's the C, and there's the G, and there's the E. And I'll draw another fermata over this. So here's our completed 4-part period. And just like we did in the phrase, you can use this as a kind of structural skeleton to flesh out a melody and a bass line in some sort of meter. Okay, so now let's actually write a period out and follow those steps again. So let's do one in a minor key this time. So choose A minor. And so again, we want to plan out the cadences first. So, and I'll use both of these staves here. So for the first phrase, let's say we want to start on a 1 and again end on a half cadence. So we'll end on a 5 here. So this is our half cadence. And then down here for phrase B, start on 1 again, and then we want to end on a perfect authentic cadence. So it's going to be 5, 1. Okay, and now we can start to flesh out these 2 independent phrases. So let's start by going to 1, or to 5, excuse me, and back to 1. And let's use a 6/4 chord since we had a lesson on those. So what if we use the pedal 6/4? And then move this up to C, which of course is most commonly harmonized by 1/6. And then to F, which could be a 6 chord. And then to D, which could be a 4 chord, which is a subdominant, which leads nicely to the half cadence. And then for our second phrase, so we're starting on this one chord, and maybe we want to follow the same harmonic idea here of moving to the dominant, but this time making it an inverted dominant. So what about this G sharp to make a 5-6? And of course this will always go back to 1. And then we can move to some subdominant harmony, so 4, and then back to 1, and then we can use one of our passing 6/4s. So what about this passing 6/4, which fills in the space between a 1 and a 1/6. And from there, that's a good setup to get to the 5, but maybe we want to add one more scale step just for fun. So let's make this a 2, 6, 5 actually. So this is a 2 diminished 6, 5. Okay. Oh, and since it's the 7th chord, of course, that means it's going to be a half diminished because it's not using the fully diminished 7th. All right, and now let's fill in the upper voices. So we've got A, C, E, moving to the dominant. And of course, always remember that the dominant in minor key needs that accidental to make it a major chord. And then this 6/4 motion. So again, we're moving from A minor to D minor to A minor, and we want to make sure that we've doubled the bass in the 6/4 chord. And then to this 1/6, and to a 6, which is going to be an F major chord. So we can move, let's see, this A down to an F, and this E down to a C, and the A stays on A here. Then again, moving down by thirds, so we're going to have 2 common tones, which are the A and the F, and we add the D. And then going to the half cadence, we want contrary motion. So we got the A moving to the G sharp, D to the B, and the F to the E. So I'll draw these lines for contrary motion. And then for the second phrase, let's see, so we don't want to double the leading tone, which is why I made this open arrangement up here. And then we can go right back to the original A minor chord. A, C, E. And now here's the passing 6/4. So A goes to G sharp, C goes to B, and E stays on B. And then let's move the G sharp down to an A, and the B down to an A, and the E to an E, just to give us a nice sounding sonority for this 1/6. And now we're moving to this half diminished 7th chord, which is going to be B, D, F, A. We've got the D in the bass, so let's see if we can make it a complete chord. So the E is going to move down to a, let's see, so it shouldn't move to a D. So this E will move up to an F, and this A will keep on A, and the E up here will jump down to the B. And then from here, we're going to move to the 5 chord. So we'll move the F down to E, the A down to a G sharp, and the B will stay on B. And then now we're nicely set up for our perfect authentic cadence. We need to have 1 in the soprano, so here it is. And then the E can move down to a C. And in fact, this A is doubled. The B moving down to A and G sharp moving up to A. So here's the structural outline for a longer period. So again, this is phrase A and this is phrase B. And if we wanted to diagram it, we could just show the key signature and the first phrase, which moves to a half cadence. So this here is phrase A, and this is a half cadence. And then phrase B, which moves to a perfect authentic cadence. And this is phrase B. And so here's our period diagram. Okay, for our first example, let's say we are given a key like G major and asked to write a period that ends on an, let's say, on a half cadence. So the way to do this is to, again, plan out the harmonic progression first and foremost to make sure it all makes sense. So we know that we need a key signature for G major, and then we're going to start with a 1 chord and end on a 5 chord, and everything else will be up to us. And all we have to do is make sure that we've got a harmonic progression that makes sense. So trying to get from 1 to 5, maybe I just want to move to a 1, 6, and then a 4, and then back to 1, and then to a 5. So it's a pretty simple phrase, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chords. So G, B, D, and then G, D, G. Again, I'm using this open spacing for this 1, 6 chord. And now moving to a C major chord, so G, C, E, G, B, D, and then F sharp, A, D. So here's our half cadence and here's our phrase. Okay, for example 2, let's say we need to write a phrase in, let's say, a minor key, like D minor, and we are asked to end it on an incomplete authentic cadence. So incomplete authentic cadence, so we know it's going to start, of course, on D minor with a 1, and we know it's going to end with a 5, 1, but one that doesn't end with the tonic and the soprano. So 5, 1. So maybe this time, doing the bass line, we want to start with this repeated bass line, which is, of course, the bass line for the pedal 6/4. And then maybe we want to have this lower neighbor C sharp to D, which is again the 5, 6 to 1 to 1, and then I'll jump from this 1 down to a 4, and then to 5 and 1, and we need the key signature. Okay, so this 4 in D minor is G minor chord, so it's going to be G, B flat, D, and we want to make sure again, since it's a 6/4 chord, to double the bass. Then back to D minor, and then the 5 in D minor is an A major chord, so we need an A, a C sharp, and an E. And we don't want to double the leading tone, of course. And then back to 1. And now this is just a regular simple root progression, so keep common tones. D, G, B flat. And now moving to 5. So here is the C sharp, and then the B flat moves to A, and the G moves to an E. And so now what happened is that we've got the leading tone in the top voice. So in fact, we did make a perfect authentic cadence. So what that lets us know is that we should go back to the beginning and rewrite this opening chord in a different way. So either start with this disposition with the F on top, or we can start with the A on the top. So D, F, A this way. Or we can try to force something different here. Let's see if we can pick it up from this point here and do these last two chords over. So let's see, we're coming from this G minor chord to a 5. So one thing we could do is move this D, let's see, up to, we can make this a 5, 7, and then move the D up to a G for the 7th, and then that leaves us with, we need a C sharp, and let's see, so G and then B, except again this is not going to work because this is, remember, a B flat, and so it can't move to the leading tone, which means that it would have to move down to an A, and this G would have to jump down to the C sharp. So this is not making satisfactory voice leading. So again, the best strategy is to just maintain this same arrangement, but to start with a different chord, opening chord, which will mean that what was in the top voice earlier that started with D will now be in the middle voice. And so in the top voice, we'll have what's happening in this voice here, if we start here on this F in the soprano. So the last chord will be, it'll be an E to an F in the top voice. Okay, and for example 3, let's say we are asked to write a period progression in a major key. So let's go back to C major. And let's say it should have a half cadence in the middle and a perfect authentic cadence at the end. And so let's plan out what we want to do for these two phrases. So let's say we can use our passing 6/4. And then to a 4 chord. And now, so we've got this step from F to G, and let's go back to the secondary dominant lesson, and let's add an F sharp half step that fills in the whole step between the subdominant and the dominant. So this will of course be a 5/6 of 5. So we've got this totally stepwise ascending progression ending with a chromatic note. And then for the second phrase, maybe we want to go up to 5 and then go down. So G to F to E. And this is that highly idiomatic progression of moving from the dominant to the note below, which means that it's a 5/4/2, and this is the 7th, moving to a 1/6 always. So this is a very common progression for this bass line, which is scale degree 5, scale degree 4, scale degree 3. And then let's move from 1/6 to 1, and then 5/1. And now filling this in on the 6/4 chord, we want to make sure to double the bass. And then G, C, G. Let's see here. F, A, C. So this voice leading here got a little bit of a bigger leap. Maybe we can change this for the G to move up to the A, and the C to stay on the C, and the G to move down to an F. That looks a lot better. And now we're moving to this chord with the F sharp in the bass, and we know it's a first inversion chord that is the dominant of this G major chord, which means that this is a D major chord. And we want to be careful, first of all, not to double this F sharp. So since it's a 6th chord, we can use this same open spacing that we did here. So let's move this down to a D, and then A and a D here. And now this moving to a 5 chord, so we can keep this D and then move this down to G and this down to B. And here's our half cadence. And now let's begin this phrase anew, so not too concerned about the progression from this 5 to this 1. And again, I'm going back to this spacing for the 1/6 chord. And then now we can go back to what we started with. And now we're at the 5 chord, and we need to make sure that it's a perfect authentic cadence. So we should be sure that the tonic is in the soprano. And then we need a 3rd, so we can move this G down to E. And there's our perfect authentic cadence. And let's diagram this period. So it's in C major. It starts on 1, and the first phrase ends with a half cadence. And then the second phrase starts on 1 and ends with a perfect authentic cadence. So here's our period. Okay, for example 4, let's make a period in a minor key. So let's go back to A minor. And so first, let's make sure we diagram it out. And let's say we're asked to make one that ends on a deceptive cadence. So which means we're going to end on a 6 here, coming from a 5. So a deceptive cadence. And then again, we're going to start back on 1 here. And it's going to end on a perfect authentic cadence. So 5 to 1. Let's see, so this bass line will be E to F. So let's fill this in. Let's see. So we can move up to 4 and back to 1, because moving between subdominant and tonic harmony is fine. And then let's move to a 1/6. And let's have that jump right up to the 5, which then goes to 6. And then for the second phrase, start on 1, and let's use the pedal 6/4 again, just for good practice. So it's 4/6/4/1, and I'll bracket this since it's a 6/4 idiom. And then let's move to a 1/6 again, and this time fill it in the space between the C and the E with a D, which let's say is another 4 chord. So this is a more simple phrasing for this period. Let's see, so now we can fill in the upper voices just like we've been doing. And again, as long as you follow these rules of keeping the common tones and moving the other voices closely, you don't have to keep checking for parallelisms. Let's see, so this A moves down to the G sharp, and then here's the E, and then this A moves up to B. And then moving to the 6th chord, so the first thing we need to make sure is that the G sharp resolves to an A, and then we want to avoid any kind of parallels. So we've got this doubled E here, so this can't move to an F, so it's got to jump down to a C, and then we'll take this G, or this B, down to an A as well to avoid parallel fifths. So we've got this F with the doubled 3rd chord here, and that's a common doubling for this deceptive cadence motion. And now starting over here, let's see. So here is our 6/4 motion, nothing new here. And then moving to this open spacing for the 1/6. And then to this D minor chord, so let's see, we want to keep this A up here, and then we need an F and a D, so we'll move this E up to an F and the A up to a D. And now we're in a good place to make a perfect authentic cadence because this A goes down to G sharp, the leading tone, and the F down to E, and the C down to B. And then the G sharp resolves to the tonic, and then we complete the chord. So here is our period in A minor, and the diagram, which looks like this. A minor from 1 to a deceptive cadence. And then second phrase to a perfect authentic cadence. And of course the idea is that the first phrase, again in a period, has a weaker cadence than the second phrase. So here's the perfect authentic and phrase B. So here's the period. Okay, thanks for watching Educator.com's AP Music Theory course. See you next time.